We're continuing Canto 1, Chapter 9, Text 19. Nice verse. O King, Lord Shivanarda, the sage amongst the demigods, and Kapila, the incarnation of Godhead, all know very confidentially about his glories through direct contact. Purport. Pure devotees of the Lord are all bhavas, or persons who know the glories of the Lord in different transcendental loving services. As the Lord has innumerable expansions of his plenary form, there are innumerable pure devotees of the Lord who are engaged in the exchange of service of different humors. Ordinarily, there are 12 great devotees of the Lord, namely Brahmanarda Shiva Kumara, Kapila Manu Prahlad, Bhishma Janaka Shukadev Goswami, Bali Maharaj, and Yamaraj Bhismadeva. Although one of them has mentioned only 3 important names of the 12 who know the glories of the Lord. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one of the great acharyas in the modern age, explains that Anubhava, or the glory of the Lord, is first appreciated by the devotee in ecstasy, manifesting the symptoms of perspiring, trembling, weeping, bodily eruptions, etc., which are further enhanced by steady understanding of the glories of the Lord, or Anubhava. Such different understandings of bhavas are exchanged between Yashoda and the Lord, binding the Lord by ropes, and in the chariot driving by the Lord in the exchange of love with Arjuna. These glories of the Lord are exhibited in his being subordinated before his devotees, and this is another feature of the glories of the Lord. Shukadeva Goswami and the Kumaras, although situated in the transcendental position, became converted by another feature of bhava and turned into pure devotees of the Lord. Here we go again about tribulations. Tribulations imposed upon the devotees by the Lord constitute another exchange of transcendental bhava between the Lord and the devotees. Just in case you didn't like tribulations, you should start to like them. The Lord says, I put my devotee into difficulty, and thus the devotee becomes more purified in exchanging transcendental bhava with me, unquote. Placing the devotee into material troubles necessitates delivering him from the illusory material relations. The material relations are based on reciprocation of material enjoyment, which depends mainly on material resources. Therefore, when material resources are withdrawn by the Lord, the devotee is % attracted toward the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Thus, the Lord snatches the fallen soul from the mire of material existence. Again, tribulations offered by the Lord to his devotee are different from tribulation resulting from vicious action. All these glories of the Lord are especially known to the great Mahajans like Brahma, Shiva, Narada, Kapila, Kumara, and Bhishma, as mentioned above, and one is able to grasp it by their grace. Well, he's really drilling down on helping Yudhisthira to get on the other side of his distressed condition. And he's certainly very capable, powerful, and merciful. Now, there's a difference between Maharaj Yudhisthira and us. I mean, it's not just that, well, Maharaj Yudhisthira was face-to-face with Grandfather Bhishma, and if I could be face-to-face with Grandfather Bhishma, then I could get on the other side of feeling bad when there's tribulation. It's not just physical proximity. It's what we heard earlier, looking up to Bhismadeva as an authority, one who is worthy of taking shelter. The principle of faith is not optional. But the principle of faith is essential. It's the starting point of bhakti. The starting point of bhakti is Shraddha. And then, according to Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, that Shraddha goes through 8 more transformations in the final stage called prema. So the prema stage is the mature stage of faith, and all the other ones in between are stages of faith with different names. So one can trace progress in terms of evolving in faith. So we have the same, in other words, we have the same opportunity as Yudhisthira just by hearing Bhismadeva's instructions in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. Same thing as on many occasions Prabhupada would speak about, people would say, oh, Arjuna was so fortunate he had Krishna's direct association, but I'll never have Krishna's direct association. I'm not so elevated. And therefore, Arjuna became perfect, but I'll never have the opportunity because I'll never have Krishna's direct association. As if direct association by his presence speaking before you was the essential operative principle. And the answer that Prabhupada, after raising that, because I haven't heard people say that, but apparently Prabhupada did, and his reply is no. When one hears Krishna's words in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is speaking. Or, even more specifically, when one hears someone repeating the words of Krishna, it's Krishna speaking. I've told this many times, but I had a first-hand experience of Prabhupada entering a state of trance right from the Vyasa, on the Vyasa-san by speaking this point. When Krishna says, surrender unto me, and when the spiritual master says, surrender unto Krishna, it's Krishna speaking. And then he said it again. I'll say it again. When Krishna says, surrender unto me, it's Krishna speaking. And when the spiritual master says, surrender unto Krishna, it's Krishna speaking. There's no difference. Krishna is directly speaking. And absorbed in that thought, because as he was speaking, it was Krishna speaking. It's a concept, but Srila Prabhupada became deeply absorbed beyond the concept in whatever it was that he had the realization of, that Krishna was speaking through him. And he went into a trance right on the Vyasa-san. It wasn't just, that's a nice idea. What's next? It was, so we're hearing Bhismadeva's pacifying Maharaj Yudhisthira, and one of the message for 3 verses in a row so far is tribulation. The other was misfortune, but same idea. It's for those who are devotees, it's not the same as for those who are not devotees. For those who are devotees, it's Krishna's directly arranging the material shelter is to be taken, the illusion or Maya of happiness in the illusory energy is available, it's taken away. And if you don't have that shelter, and if you're a devotee, what do? You take deeper shelter of Krishna. And that's Krishna's mercy. And so sometimes there's tribulation. Sometimes it gets, severe. Sometimes it's over the top. Sometimes. And that's special mercy. Provided one is a devotee. It helps to take away false shelters, to then leave one bereft of false shelters. I must take shelter of reality, the Supreme Person. Our bhakti process is to cultivate those two things. There's a description along this line in great detail by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Now we know from right in Bhagavad Gita the 9 stages of bhakti, from Shraddha to Prema, and in a very succinct manner in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada goes through those 9 stages in his purport. And not other places that I'm aware of are those 9 stages outlined in detail, but Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur outlines in detail the 9 stages. And one of the messages within chapter 8 of Madhurya Kandamani, he describes the covering and the removal of covering. The covering is a covering of false ego. And false ego is the thinking of oneself to be the doer, acting in the concept of I and mine. I'm the body and I'm the doer of my activities because I'm this body and the body is doing activities. And then the results are mine because I'm doing it. So in that material conception, that's our circumstance in material life. And the initial faith, Shraddha, is I want to realize what's beyond that bodily conception. And so he outlines in chapter 8 the stages, one by one by one, where it's very specific. The degree to which false ego remains, and in each of the stages, the stage at which it's around 50-50 is in the nishtha, so we're not there yet. We still have the false ego influence in a big way, and the awakening of, it could be called another ego, or the self-realization, our true identity, and the eternal servant of Krishna identity, without necessarily what's the rasa or the swarup, but I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. Consciousness becomes developed. As the covering is removed, the consciousness of Krishna and our relationship with him as servant starts to grow. That's the bhakti process. And eventually, the material ego becomes just a shadow. It's a nice language. It's, abhas. Even in the bhava stage, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, false ego is there, even in the bhava stage, as a shadow. Interesting. And in the prema stage, it's gone completely. So the sense of tribulation has a scale. And it's seen in a material way according to the influence we heard in the previous purport. These two energies, spiritual, material, mixing creates a sense of tribulation or misfortune. But when one is firmly situated in the spiritual potency, with the spiritual conception, circumstances aren't seen as tribulation. It's seen as mercy. So in this verse, Bhismadeva is saying 3 of the 12 Mahajans understand this. And the commentary says actually all 12 understand, and Bhismadeva isn't referring to himself or the others, he's just referring to 3 by direct experience. They don't see misfortune. Now, there are things that you certainly can describe as misfortune for everyone, including these great personalities. Prahlad, Janaka's daughter was kidnapped. Anyway, so misfortune may come to a perfected person. Misfortune may come to a perfected person. And we're not perfect. So when misfortune comes our way, one can just think in a humble way, I'm getting off light. But that's still on the relative and material side. It's true. It's light. But the spiritual conception is not full yet. So Bhismadeva is giving the full picture to Yudhisthira, which is also being transmitted to us in the pages of the Bhagavatam. Compliments of Shukadeva Goswami speaking it, and Vyasadeva writing it, and our acharyas commenting on it. We're getting the full opportunity. This message of Srimad Bhagavatam, Allah is an essential part of the bhakti process that can carry us to that stage of perfection. The sound vibration of the Srimad Bhagavatam can carry us to the stage of perfection, provided we're hearing attentively. Small thing, right? So why is it we don't hear it attentively? Because we're distracted. Why are we distracted? Because we're absorbed in the material conception of life. We're paying attention to the temporary. It's not a different idea. It's just elaborated upon very elegantly and eloquently in the Bhagavatam, but the same understanding is there. 2nd chapter Bhagavad Gita. Just this morning, listening to Prabhupada in his standard booming voice in Hyderabad, 1972, describing 2nd chapter Bhagavad Gita and saying the same point from 2nd chapter Bhagavad Gita. In the material conception of life, the soul is neglected, and all attention is going to the covering of the soul. You know, the classic examples, the polishing of the bird cage, painting the bird cage, making it very nice, and neglecting the bird within, and the bird dies. So what about people that do the same? They're paying attention to the covering, the happiness and comforts, etc., materialistic civilization promises, and to some degree, it's there. There's objects. I mean, here we are in a nice house that's heated and etc., etc. I was thinking this morning about a visit that I paid one time to Cornell University. When I was there at Cornell University, somebody came to the program, and I didn't recognize him, but he recognized me from the time that he had started his Krishna consciousness in New York City. And then after some time, he moved to Ithaca, which is where Cornell University is. And he invited me to come visit his place. His place wasn't a home. I remember it very clearly. It was kind of like a Boy Scout lean-to. It was a place on the border of a farmer's agricultural field. He had gotten permission from the farmer to build his little place, and he was deliberately, it's as cold in Ithaca, New York in the winters as it is here, or about the same. And he lived there year round, without electricity, without a phone, without so then, how do you, without a refrigerator? I asked him, how do you do this? And he said, she showed me, here's some, he lifted up underneath here, here's some roots and some carrots and some things. That's my refrigerator. If by nature's arrangement, there was a way to keep food in stock without spoiling until the time. And, how did he cook? He cooked with with fire, and that's how he lived. And he was doing it voluntarily. What's it like in the winter? Well, I build a fire. It's happiness is not, and he was voluntary. Happiness is not dependent upon material comforts. To think that happiness is dependent upon material comforts is where misery comes. Because that's not where happiness comes. And not only the satisfaction at the soul level is missing, because one gets involved in the temporary, but it's never really does happiness come, because happiness is not in the temporary. So he learned the principle. It's not like Prabhupada said, go live in a lean-to by the side of a farmer's agricultural field in the middle of a forest. I mean, the forested area around the perimeter of his farm, the agricultural land, is where he lived, with the permission of the farmer, who was happy to have him stay there because he didn't harm anything. And that. I started thinking of that because of the way that Prabhupada lived his life. You saw that little room, really tiny, and where did he cook, and where was his toilet, and where did he take his bath? The same, what he did, not the same, similar to what he did when he lived in Manhattan, in the office apartment. That wasn't like there was no toilet, there's no kitchen, and he that's where he lived for some period of time. And when at the right time in the morning, when Dr. Mishra was up, he'd put on his overcoat in the winter and go to his place and take a bath and do his cooking. And wow. So that's pretty intense. So how can someone? It hurts to even think about the standard of austerities that Prabhupada underwent. But what was his focus? His focus was his mission, the service that was assigned to him. One of the little passages from Giriraj Maharaj's book, I'll Build You a Temple, the Juhu story. Towards the end of Prabhupada's days, it was Kumbh Mela, and his health was terrible, but he wanted to go, so he went. It was really cold, but he sat there and shivered through the whole thing. And insisted on the devotees attending Mangal Arati, and it was so cold they didn't get up for Mangal Arati. So Prabhupada, demonstrating, took a cold bath. Even his health was a wreck. Taking a cold bath from a bucket that wasn't warmed water, it was just cold water in a cold air, and attended Mangal Arati to teach them to attend Mangal Arati because he knew that was good for them. And then this nice passage where Kaushalya brought Prabhupada a very soft, I forget the kind of wool, Angora wool or something like that, cashmere wool sweater. And Prabhupada took the sweater, held it to his cheek because it was really soft, and then said, "You should go up in a temple in Bangalore." To a lady. And she tried, because that was his focus. That was his focus. When that shelter is taken, then one can rise above the tribulation, misfortune, the worldly circumstance. Commonly we think of tribulation, Prabhupada was saying just in this class this morning in Hyderabad, the climatic changes. So, it got a little colder here in Boston. And, who knows? It might snow. Who knows? Who knows? The day after Easter, we're coming back from Gitanagari. It was not just flurries, it was accumulation of snow. After Easter. Some time ago, I was remembering, gosh, on Easter Sunday, it snowed in Chicago, and here it was the day after Easter. And it was not light. It was kind of like dangerous driving in a not exactly a snowstorm, but a significant amount. Anyway, what are you going to do? There's the tolerate, but what's your mission? Where do you fix your consciousness besides it doesn't go there? Where does it go? And if your consciousness is absorbed, that's the message that Bhismadeva is giving to Yudhisthira. Krishna wanted this. So don't lament, because you're the instrument of what Krishna wanted. And now, give protection to the citizens. That's what the citizens want. That's what Krishna wanted. So stay focused on your mission. The service, that's your service. Stay focused in that mood of service. And then, back to this Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. As the stages of bhakti evolve, that sense, that seed sense, not just I wish to get free from the misery of material existence, but I wish to enter into this mood of being a servant of Krishna. And that is our original consciousness. That's the characteristic of the soul. And as that characteristic of the soul becomes revived through the hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam, the chanting of the holy name, and engaging in our other primary activities of bhakti, then that consciousness becomes stronger, and as that consciousness becomes stronger, simultaneously the false ego, which then includes the sense of mine, I and mine, and my happiness or my distress that goes with the mine, it subsides. It becomes less significant, and eventually becomes zip. No, we're not there yet. But that's the stages of the bhakti process. And we should be, introspective to understand where we are. But knowing the science of the bhakti process, if we stay faithfully with the bhakti process and absorbed in the purpose of those activities, that is, knowing who we are, that Krishna's eternal servant, etc., and the particular manifestation of service which is suited to our psychophysical nature, so that connects the varnashram system with the direct bhakti system, we can remain on a proper path to reach that elevated stage. And with that consciousness comes freedom. Freedom from the tribulations of material existence, freedom from the restrictions that having a material body impose upon us. Having a material body as a facility is also a restriction. We have the body that we have because of past sadasad yoni janmasu. Karanam guna sangosya sadasad janma yonishu. So here we are, the body that we have. And one doesn't need to rearrange the past karma. We just accept what we have and we engage that in Krishna's service. And Krishna, seeing that we're responsibly using the gifts that he's endowed us with, then Krishna enhances those endowments. If he so desires, we can become a very elevated personality doing some nice service. And even if it's not like that, just being in the mood of the servant, it's glorious. Krishna is accepting our service. That's glorious. If we're humble, we'll understand who am I to be eligible to render devotional service. The anxiety shifts from material happiness and distress to striving more and more towards that spiritual connection. Being eternally situated, permanently situated. This word sanatana means eternal, and sanatana is speaking of the living entity as being eternal, and it also speaks of the Supreme Person as sanatana, because he's the abode of that which is eternal, and his abode is eternal. The principle is quite simple. The faith, the operative principle of faith, and the degree of covering of faith, because we may have faith or affinity for the material and finding happiness over there. And that it covers or diminishes or weakens our faith. So we hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and worship Krishna according to the indications, and serve Krishna according to the indications we find, with looking up to these great personalities that are giving us these perfect teachings and the perfect scripture to make our lives move in the direction of spiritual elevation. And then the tribulation quotient starts to move. The snowstorm can still be there, or like look what Prabhupada again. The hardship can be there. That's okay. The life's mission is there, awaiting for us to fulfill it. That's hopeful. Okay, so that's text 19. Let's see if there's some discussion. Quarter after. Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. This is with reference to minimalism and being simple. Minimalism and being simple.
Okay.
So in the context of, this is a personal experience. While cooking at the temple, I keep getting the idea, or people keep suggesting that I should be cooking very simple on Ekadashis. Don't make it very elaborate. It's not meant to be elaborate on Ekadashis. So, but from my point of view, people who are coming in new and people who are not yet knowing anything about Krishna consciousness, for them prasadam is an attractive proposition. So I was in a dilemma to understand which one should I be thinking of. Is it minimalism and being simple, or attracting people with a opulent prasadam on an Ekadashi?
Or here's a third one, pleasing the deity.
Yes, Maharaj. Pleasing the deity with variety.
Okay.
So that is fine.
Well, I don't want to interfere with the management policies. I know that our business is pleasing Krishna. Management policy isn't going to overlap or usurp that principle. Now, I don't know if it's a management policy or if it's somebody that's in the kitchen when you're cooking on Ekadasi. Is it a management policy that says? So, as long as it's not rubbing against a management policy, certainly you prepare nice prasadam. I mean, here's a historical example. I can't remember the detail because I was not so much involved in preparing the menu for the Sunday feast, but Prabhupada was specific about how many items and which items, and he wanted. And I remember specifically in Boston, a mandatory item was sweet rice. And they trained me how to make sweet rice. And now I don't know how many temples have sweet rice for the Sunday feast. It's certainly not an Ekadasi, but every Sunday feast must have, and a big. And I not only did it in Boston, I did it in New York. Made sweet rice and put it in the refrigerator, got it cool, and the whole thing. So, because it for the reason that you're speaking of. Now that's a Sunday feast, but the principle is prasadam should be very attractive because, gosh, how many people, not just Western people, even Indian people, how many people started coming regularly to the temple because they liked the prasadam. Not just knowing that it's prasadam, they liked it. So, for a preaching principle is, as nice as you can make it. You can use the word opulent, or, you can use the word, involved instead of simple. Somebody that wants to be simple, they can just eat simple. That's fine. But for the congregation people, it's as nice as possible. For the deity, the best. But when, Sunday feast sweet rice is not just for the deity, it's for the preaching mission. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Guru Maharaj, you were mentioning about I and mine. So the false ego concept, and I was thinking it becomes very gray when it is in the realm of devotional service, where a devotee may start feeling it's my project, my program, my service. So how does, so how much of it is the right, or how much of that thinking is the healthy thinking, saying like owning or feeling like serving Krishna as my, not qualified, but still be able to serve, versus the material aspect of it, which is...
Well, here's just three things. One devotee, I'll withhold their name, was asking Prabhupada, is it okay to be attached to your service? Prabhupada's answer was yes, unless and until the spiritual master assigns a different service. Then you become attached to the different service because you're attached to the instruction, not specifically the proprietorship of the service. And what how good you can do at it, and how, it's mine, that proprietary thing. So the second is, if there's, to the degree that there's an inability to respect others' service, then it's unwholesome. If there's a sense of dedication to one's service, while at the same time respecting others and their service, that's wholesome. And then the third is, along the same line, because you mentioned it, I'll just connect it to this Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. there's probably a mix of the false ego and the spiritual ego, or the spiritual sense of, I'm meant to please Krishna. So if one is attached to the desire to please Krishna, that's good. To the degree that this is mine, and I got my 6 guns and shoot in the air saying, step away because it's my service. That's false ego, and that's unwholesome. So where do you draw the line, is your question. And does it enhance your spirit of pleasing Krishna? And that's kind of subjective. But the process of bhakti is variable according to one's position on the trajectory of faith, or the trajectory of spiritual conception of life. I would say one should be wary of my service and the material side. If there's more emphasis on the service, then you can put my in front of it, and it's going to be wholesome. Radha, what's your question?
I have a comment.
It's a comment. Okay, go for it.
So you were talking about how
Your voice has gotten softer these days. How come? I'm used to a louder voice. Can you speak louder and pull the microphone straight? Yeah, that's it. There we go. Let's hear you. Go.
So you were talking about the man who was renounced that you met in the university.
Yes.
So
Are you ready for it?
I feel like that's very renounced. And
That's
how do
really
we
renounced. It's severe.
Yeah. So how do we also try to be renounced even though we're in big things?
How do we do what?
Try to be renounced even though we're in big houses and big facilities.
You're mumbling. How do we renounce?
While you are surrounded by big houses, big facilities. Okay.
You know the verse about detachment, right? From Rupa Goswami's verse? Yes, you do. Anasaktasya vishayan yatarhan upayunjitaha nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagya, detachment, right? And asakti means attachment. It's one of the 9 stages of bhakti, is attachment. Just before bhava is attachment. Ruchi, asakti, bhava, prema. Asakti means attachment. And anasakti means without attachment. Without attachment to vishaya means sense gratification. You accept things. So I'm focusing on your question. Your business is not to be like that person. And my business is not to be like that person. Our business, yours and mine and everyone in the room, our business is to recognize what is, using this example of terminology of to keep life simple. His word also was minimalist. What's really needed, and then what you may need, and what somebody else may need, and what that fellow at Cornell University saw as a need is going to be different. So we recognize what we need and what's need in order to maintain a steadiness in bhakti, while all the while trying to go in the direction of A, increasing bhakti, and B, diminishing that which we don't need. Look around the room here. It's a nice big room, and then there's not a whole bunch of furniture. So, etc. So, what do we need in order to be peaceful and steadily cultivate bhakti? So that's what in response to your question, that's what you need to do. You don't have to worry about big houses. You worry about when the situation that you're in, that your consciousness is progressively little by little by little, going towards Krishna's service, and then you accept those things that are around you that are useful for your service. That how many people have a big piano in their living room? So you're using that in your service. And your parents are happy to spend the money to buy a piano so you can practice and learn that propensity that you have in Krishna service. And then you with gratitude to Krishna and your parents for providing that facility, then you use it for that purpose with a heart. And that's how you handle it. With gratitude, then there's devotion. Let me learn this skill so I can offer it to Krishna. Not just learn, but offer it to Krishna. That's how. Then that's the detachment. Yuktam vairagya. You've heard that phrase. Yukta is to engage. Vairagya is detachment or renunciation. Yukta vairagya. Using things in the mood of detachment.
Yeah, this also reminds me in India, or like when you're in the woods, there's literally no toilet. You just go somewhere and you do all the stuff that you need to do. So you necessarily don't need a lot of things.
That's in some places and not in all places. The sanitation problem in India is a problem.
Yeah.
And so there are sanitary ways of dealing with things, but depending upon circumstances, what everybody out there in India does, and what you do are not necessarily the same thing. We are concerned about sanitation, so we take advantage of sanitary practices. But here's an interesting one for you. In Gitanagari, the persons who established Gitanagari, he now lives somewhere here, I think in New Hampshire, Harmananda, and Satyabhama was his wife, is his wife. So they established for themselves, they called it row houses, and it was off the grid row houses, right in Gitanagari, where they didn't have toilets, they didn't have flush toilets, they had compost toilets. And they would use the compost toilet and spread something so it would not smell bad, and then would decompose. And then it became fertilizer for the fields. No electricity, it was lanterns. No telephone, so it was by design. But, it wasn't a lean-to, it wasn't a Boy Scout camp. It was, parents with children, and that's how they lived, by their choice. Not everyone lived that way, but there were 4 of them. And they were, occupied. Now, today, the leaders in Gitanagari have a different vision. So they converted them into really, comfortable accommodations for guests, because that's the economy that they wish to move in. They use the word tourism. So I stayed in one of those row houses. They now don't call it row houses, they call it forest view, because you look out the back and there's the forest. But in that room there's electricity and there's toilets and there's running water and there's a refrigerator that doesn't work. It was warmer in the refrigerator than in the room. It was colder in the room than in the refrigerator. So I put stuff that needed to be refrigerated in the refrigerator next door, and that was fine. So, it's, and there were 6 beds. 6 beds for 6 people in a place that was the home for a family. Husband, wife, and 2 children. Big enough for that. Small, but big enough. So, by choice, people, so you can choose, and you in time you'll have your own, whatever it is that you're going to live in, and you furnish it or live in the forest or whatever you're going to do. Okay, someone else? Do we have something online?
Maharaj, you mentioned that devotees are put
Can you
into...
do me a favor? Speak slowly
Okay.
and try to avoid saying
Okay.
challenge.
I'll try.
You said it 3 times already. Try. And you
You
can take
mentioned...
lessons from Radha because she's learned. She says so instead of Gotcha. Go ahead.
You mentioned that devotees are put into tribulations by Krishna and non-devotees are put in tribulations by Maya or their karmic reactions. So, for someone like me who is trying to become a devotee, where are my tribulations coming from?
It vacillates. It oscillates depending upon your consciousness. Because sometimes your consciousness is better than other times. It oscillates. And it's also in degrees. We just read the purport from yesterday's verse, and you'll have the answer to your question. And the online question, and we're going to end.
This question is from Amara Mataji. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Should there be any criterion on accepting a service other than bandwidth? We want to do some services, but some are requested. Could you kindly shed some light on this aspect?
Time management. And also, is it a one time or an ongoing? Because that's also time management. And a sense of urgency, depending upon what's pressing on you, your time management, activities. You may do some emergency service, even though your time is maxed because it's an emergency. So there's different factors. Having a little intelligence is really helpful. But how do you get intelligence when you're not intelligent? You do nice service to Krishna, he'll give you the intelligence. Okay.
And Maharaj, you also mentioned about psychophysical nature. So how to match the psychophysical nature to the services?
That was built within her question. There are things that I like to do, and some things I may not like to do. That tells you something is within my psychophysical nature. But some things that are outside of your psychophysical nature, you may do them because it's important, and because you're being requested. If it's outside your psychophysical nature, you're not likely to do it unless you're asked. But if you're asked, then these are the criteria, because that's what her question was. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.